One. And we are recording with the one and only Dr. Robert Malone, who is now joining the elitist group of fancy microphones and fancy cameras as we've become detached from the humble roots and ascend to a higher level of resolution and audio fidelity. Dr. Robert Malone, you hold all of the patents for the mRNA vaccine. Despite what everybody says about you, you're kicked off Twitter. And as you just said, Twitter is indeed a cyber weapon. Your first episode on here was episode 495, which hastened the quick growth and then utter collapse of my YouTube channel, but which I say with love because it has brought in more growth to this podcast than my wildest imagination. Could you talk about the Pfizer EU agreement and what exactly is so uh, important about it?
So that one is important, but not as important as I thought it was. And we'll go into that. And then there is the video clip that was just has been kind of distributed today from an EU hearing in which there was questioning of Pfizer about whether or not Pfizer had actually tested the vaccine for prevention of transmission before it was deployed. And the witness called from Pfizer flat out categorically denied that they had done any such testing. And they had no idea at the time it was deployed or since whether or not it would actually stop transmission. It was another hope, working at the speed of science. I forget what the specific clip was. So I posted that on my Getter link, and you may want to follow that. The disclosure you're talking about was the actual contract signed by the European Union with Pfizer, and it obligated all EU states to comply. That's one of the things a lot of people don't appreciate, is the EU is really quite authoritarian. Brussels is not a nice, happy, let's all get along kind of a place. And I really learned that in the context of the Malone election recently, in which it became clear to me from my colleagues in Italy as they were helping me comprehend what was going on, that in Italy and many of the other what are really client states of Brussels and the United States, by the way, that's the perception that many Italians have of themselves, is they have two taskmasters. One is Brussels and the other is the CIA. They've said so directly to me that that's just the way things have been. They, because of the indebtedness that the country has incurred, and of course that was accelerated during the COVID crisis, they functionally have no operational latitude. The bankers own them. The same is true, I learned when I traveled to Ireland. Ireland also really is completely beholden to the bankers that it has taken loans out with to get through the COVID crisis. And that's part of what's driving all of this economic collapse that's happening in the EU. I mean, who would have thought it? I'm riffing here, but I had a colleague, a friend from South Africa, who is an investment manager, who had told me last summer that he predicted that the EU was going to come apart and that Germany was going to face a major economic crisis. And already the Germans were searching for firewood. And at the time, it just seemed like crazy talk. But here we are. He was just more aware and attuned to the news. So in the case of this Pfizer document, colleagues from Italy sent this to me very recently. And they seem to think that this was a disclosed document that had been obtained by activists in Italy and Rome. But in fact, it wasn't. It had been leaked to some Italian radio station, I think, or something, and had been on just kind of sitting there on a server, and people hadn't paid attention to it. So they grabbed it, sent it off to me, and I amplified it. The key things about it, I mean, there's a number of them. You learn the nuance of the negotiation. It has the actual signature page. It shows who did the negotiation on behalf of the EU. And it clearly shows the egregious terms that Pfizer got them to accept, which includes complete indemnification from any liability for an very extended period of time for anyone using the vaccine. That's the main thing I think that is important in there. There's a lot of pages and pages and pages of legal information and contract language that is all very favorable to Pfizer. So basically, I think we can conclude from that the EU negotiators, and presumably what I've heard is the same basic contract has been deployed all over the world with various nuances. I've heard that some versions in some countries include clauses that if the country breaches the contract, then they will concede to Pfizer ownership of ports or other tangible assets.
Of ports?
Yeah, it's an amazing situation. But when you think about it, unpack all this. What you had, we now know, was a virus which really wasn't that pathogenic in terms of morbidity and particularly mortality, except when it was mismanaged by dosing with toxic drugs like remdesivir and jamming ventilators tubes down people's throats and blowing their lungs out. But when managed with almost any combination of anti-inflammatory agents, let alone whether you add hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin to it, the mortality was very low. And of course, in children, the mortality is extremely low. But you had this fear porn coordinated globally, pushed out, and that generates fear in the populace. The politicians have to respond to that fear. And the politicians basically got pushed into a position where, in order to appease their clientele, their populace, they felt that they had to rush and sign these egregious terms and conditions and give amazing profit to these companies that had developed these products in a rush without adequate testing using government subsidies. So, if you're Pfizer or Moderna, what's not to like here? The government pays you to develop it, and then they pay you to deploy it, and then they give you complete indemnification for anything that might go wrong. But that's really what that document reveals. It's kind of a historic piece that shows just how badly mismanaged the government, the European Union, and by extension many governments all over the world, managed their interface with Pfizer in the early days of the crisis.
You kind of starts to wonder, like, is this all a psyop to make you yearn for the good old days of the military-industrial complex? Right? It's because it's so absurd, their profits. It's like, can you believe they made $40 billion? And then you look back to like 2008, right? And that was a new paradigm shift of government involvement in the free market, $700 billion for TARP funds. But then you go back to 2001 and you have Rumsfeld just nonchalantly being like, yeah, we can't find $2.3 trillion anyway. And like that you start to look at it more and more, and it does seem like that is we've always known it's the nucleus of power.
I could imagine the boardroom at Halliburton going, damn, we should have got into biologics.
Absolutely. But I really do think it is you have candidate A and they're way too bad. So you bring in candidate B who's comically evil. You start going, dude, I would love candidate A. I think that's the whole point, is we're looking at COVID, and then it's like the war in Ukraine. Though sad, it's like, man, I do miss the days of corruption when it was just on TV and you go, those defense contractors. Then you go about your day.
So, Tommy, to your point, the other day, Bannon called me and he wanted me to go on a segment. And he was talking and advising me on staying in my lane, and which is not how I'm wired, as you know. Absolutely I think neither are you. No, but he started. I go, Steve, the truth is, I find this stuff increasingly boring. The corruption is so rampant and so deep that it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah.
It's everywhere you look. There it is.
Well, you start to have to change how you look at it, right? I can only imagine it's something like World War II, right? Where it's this unimaginable thing. air power, thousands of B-17s, all glistening in the sun, dropping fire bombs. But after 5 years of it, even that sort of Armageddon shock and awe, you start to go like, yeah, whatever. And it starts, then you get to the point where you have civilized men like FDR, part of a political scion family and his long French cigarettes going, build an A bomb and drop it on a civilian population. Because you do get to a point where it's so evil that there's no point in shooting the fish in the barrel. So you just have to drain the barrel. So that's kind of how it starts with COVID, right? But it could have been anything. It could have been COVID. It could have been '08. It could have been the war on terror, whatever you want. But there is something that pulls you into it, and you get pulled into all the colorfulness of it, and Fauci and Moderna and censorship and blah blah blah. But as you start to look at it more, you see it's just an extension of the main root system, whatever you want to call it, the Illuminati, the deep state, the rich. I mean, whatever you want to call it. And you start to get bored with the smaller stuff. You're like, yeah, they lied about COVID. You're like, what is 700 billion a year for 50 years? A sitting president, Eisenhower. I always think about this. Sorry, I know I'm ranting, but like Dwight D. Eisenhower, 5-star general, supreme commander of the Allied forces, becomes president of the United States, rises to the tippy top, fleshes out the entire continuity of government system. I mean, if there's ever been someone at the top of the throne of the planet, it was Dwight Eisenhower. 3 days before he gives up office, he goes from the Oval Office, like, by the way,
by the way,
there's a military industrial complex has influence, both warranted and unwarranted, in the halls of the United States, and there's a technocratic elite that are taking over. 2 days later, one day before he gives up office, he brings Kennedy into the office and goes, when there is a nuclear attack plan, you're going to have about 60 seconds to decide. And if all things go south, and he picks up the phone and he goes, Opal 3. And Kennedy goes, within 30 seconds, you could feel a thudding in your chest as a helicopter came to pick us up and whisk us away to one of multiple nuclear bunkers. And then Kennedy takes charge, goes, no, we're going to end the war, gets his dome popped in Dallas. And you have to look back at it all and go, yeah, COVID kind of gets a little boring. You go, there is a machine in charge. COVID's just, no pun intended, is just a symptom of one of the many legs of the machine.
Yeah. And this gets to the Jekyll Island book and
everything
else.
G. Edward Griffin, 19. Yeah, and then that's the thing. You go. Eisenhower gives that speech on January 17th, 1961. You go back 28 years to Smedley Butler, the most decorated Marine in U.S. history, comes out and he goes, hey, people from the DuPont family and the Warburgs and the Remingtons, they want to give me money, make me the king of America, remove FDR as a figurehead, and take 5,000 disgruntled soldiers from World War I and march on the Capitol. And the Congressional Committee on Un-American Activities just goes, all right, and it just and 20 years before that was the creation of the Federal Reserve. So
yeah,
I mean, I know we're laughing, but I also don't know what else you're supposed to do.
Oh, well, the good point. So we got to be careful here because people nitpick. They nitpick every expression that I have on video now, and every little tiny word, and they use those to attack me. So I did this video with exactly. We're supposed to be somber, and we can't. No gallows humor allowed.
All right.
Yeah, exactly. I did this video movie with Matthias Desmond in Spain, and we're sitting around, and the topic comes up about the mass formation psychosis, and where it is total gallows humor. We're sitting here talking about it, and he's saying, yeah, you said those words, and then I became famous, and then the whole use of the term psychosis has become such a big brouhaha. And no, I did not invent the term. It was used by people like Sigmund Freud and Gustave Le Bon and so many other people. So we're joking about it, And somebody takes that clip and weaponizes it and shows, makes the case that Matthias and I had just deployed that as a joke on humanity, as evidenced by our laughing about it. So I just want to put the stake in the sand, just because you and I were expressing gallows humor over the absurdity of the whole situation that we find ourselves in and the overwhelming oppressiveness of it. And I think humor is a natural human reaction in order to relieve the stress and all the other feelings about that. It doesn't mean that we're taking it lightly, and we don't appreciate all the death and destruction of JFK and Bobby and everybody else, Martin Luther.
It's, if you really want to kind of use their own weapons against them, everyone's so hell-bent on virtue signaling. When something gets, I have never been more afraid of Donald Trump, and they tweet it out to show you that they're a good person. Throughout history, gallows humor is what you do when you can't even cry because there's nothing else to do but supply yourself with some endogenous endorphins and go, well, I guess we're screwed. So, I mean, if you really want to play technical, laughing is the best virtue signaling you can do, because that is what the brain does when there's nothing else to do. I remember my brothers and I laughing several days after my oldest brother died, because there's nothing else to do. Your brain is broken. So screw those people that don't understand how to laugh. If you're not laughing, it's because you haven't dug deep enough. You hadn't looked at what's really going on.
How deeply absurd it is. I agree.
Yeah.
And it's been such a journey. I mean, you and I have kind of traveled it together in a strange way with all these podcasts over time. It's been a pleasure for me.
Oh, well, thank you. It's absolutely been a pleasure for me. And it's like you're talking about people saying, "Oh, you and Matthias are having these gallows humors, laugh at it." Like, I think it's also important to paint just how chaotic and random these podcasts have been. Like you just said, us doing them together. For anyone that doesn't know, like what led to that episode 653. This is 652, so almost 300 episodes ago. You, Dr. McCullough, and Dr. Desmond on January 4th of this year.
Just so.
Excuse
me. Good, just so, and good job on you for lining that up.
Oh, thank you. But like, for people that look at it and they're like, oh, this was all brought together. I've had people tell me that there was like symbolism in that podcast. I had Dr. McCullough went to Alex Jones to do InfoWars and invited me. My brother lives in Austin. So I was like, I told my older brother, I'm like, dude, do you want to go meet Alex Jones? And he was like, yes. And so like I flew down from there, and I had caught norovirus a couple days before. So I'm traveling across the United States on planes with gastroenteritis, and I'll let you Google that and make your own conclusions. Go with my older brother. We're just giggling like schoolgirls. We get to meet Alex Jones. And that night I go back to my hotel. I don't hang out with my older brother because of the norovirus. I have nothing else to do, and I'm in bed. You had just gone on Joe Rogan's show. So I was just listening to it just to take my mind off of the explosive problem I was having in the bathroom. And I kept hearing you mention mass formation psychosis. Being me, I was just like, I didn't even know who that doctor was, Desmond. I thought he was like a Freud. I don't know, he'd been dead for a while. So I just Googled him, found him, emailed him, and he got back to me and was like, yeah, I'd love to do it. So I was like, oh, cool. And I had no idea he was in Belgium. So I'm trying to like put this podcast together. No idea he's so many hours away from me. I travel with norovirus back here to Maryland. My car gets stuck in the snow the night before at 2 a.m. I have to call a tow truck with norovirus. I get back here at 8 a.m. I'm walking to the gym in like a disgusting, dehydrated, sickly manner. And I get a call from you that's like, I'd love to do it. And I was like, oh, cool. So I like run back here, flustered, like freezing, sick, like cars like just destroyed with ice, have lost God knows how many pounds the previous days through the toilet. And that episode was put together on a whim and held together with bubble gum and Band-Aids. There's no big picture here. It fell into place. I don't.
Well, that's where you have to evoke divine providence, right?
I mean, truly though. Truly, like what? So, but I mean, even that though, the reason I said all of that is like, if you think there's any sort of greater picture here, about gallows humor or they're all in on it. No, it was having the, I guess, the arrogance to think that these people would come on my podcast.
Well, it was just a bunch of people getting together and shooting the bull.
Yeah,
That's all it was.
but even that is like Connect Four or Tetris, like the pieces fell together. Um, but that is to kind of completely pivot back from that. It's sorry guys all to hear about my story with gastroenteritis. In terms of what Mr. Bannon said to you, is that something you find to be true? Because your book, which is coming out, Lies My Government Told Me, it's not, I would imagine, solely about COVID. It is about lies. Would you agree that COVID is just one manifestation of this, the machine, what Jekyll Island, military industrial complex, Eisenhower, whatever you want to
Absolutely.
call it?
Yeah. So the way the book flows is kind of unusual, I'm told. Uh, and the story of it was I had helped Bobby Kennedy edit the Fauci book twice, and after I recovered from my depression, having read it in detail, then the question was raised: would I like to write a book? And I didn't. They didn't really think that I was a writer. And so the idea was that we just put a compilation of people's personal stories together. And it would all go very fast, which is why the deadline keeps slipping. And it would be, cheap and easy, and somebody'd write an introduction and slam bam, and there it was. And I decide that's part of what made me decide to launch the Substack was the logic that I could serialize the chapters, because I can tell you that I don't think we ever actually got the stipend retainer that was supposed to come to us for the book, and so it would not have fed the horses for a month. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So we launched into the Substack, and then we had to kind of make sense about what a book structure would be. And so I did a lot of back and forth with Jill trying to figure this out. And she's going to be a co-author on the book now, by the way. She's put a lot into it and deserves to be a co-author. But the structure is wrapped around how a physician encounters a patient. And there's three main things that, because I'm coming from my core competency, there's three main things that happen in the transaction between a physician and a patient. The first is the history and physical. That's when the patient comes to the doctor with their chief complaint. The second one is the diagnosis, and the third one is the treatment plan. Very simple. So the book is structured around that. And so the history and physical part is a series of first-person narratives from people like Meryl Nass and Pierre Corey and myself and many others, saying, this is what I've experienced over the last 2+ years. This is how I've encountered COVID. These are the things that have been done to me. These are the experiences I've had. Deplatforming, losing your license, all those kinds of things, the censorship, the fear porn, all that. And then the second part is kind of examining it and following the trail of what happened to us. How do we make sense out of this experience that we've all had? So the second part is all about sense making, and it follows, through, literally does talk about the central banks and the BIS and the Rothschilds as one chapter. Talks a lot about censorship. It talks about the science of what's happened, or the non-science. It talks about scientism. It has a whole bunch of philosophy in there about what underpins it, what we've experienced, etc. And then the last part that's a little shorter is what can we do about it? What can we do going forward? And that was the hardest part to write. Mm-hmm. The title that everybody agreed we should use is The Lies My Government Told Me and the Better Times Ahead. And as I got into it, just got harder and harder to imagine the better times ahead.
That is kind of one of the things, is whenever I find myself rambling, which is every day on this podcast, is I'll get to the end of just 10 minutes ago, yelling about Dwight Eisenhower and General Smedley Butler. And you do kind of come to this point where you're like, well, what's the positive recommendation? Because there is, but I would argue there isn't really much value in stating what's wrong. Really, anybody with eyes and ears can say what's wrong, right? Warfare, hunger, rape. Okay, good, great, noted. Now what? If
Yeah,
there isn't a recommendation, it's kind of a moot point.
and I think that we can all, at least you and I probably could agree that what we've seen, we were just talking about it, is this heavy hand of globalist hyper wealthy that control virtually all the capital and most of the companies of the world. And they exist in a space that is truly transnational, with typically with very deep involvement with the CCP. And they live in a world in which they believe that it is ethically appropriate to manipulate the rest of us in so many different ways, psychologically, physically, economically, et cetera, et cetera. And we all know the metaphor that's bandied about all the time about sheeple, but in fact, we are treated like livestock.
Yeah.
And when you come to terms with the existence of people with that much power that have, if they have an ethical framework, it's certainly alien to me. It's not the one I was raised in. How do you accommodate yourself to that in the likelihood that they will succeed in leveraging this for even more power than they already have? And they have clearly already leveraged it for more economic power than they had before. And I think the only answer that I've heard that's at all compelling is decentralization. And community, local community, decentralization, states' rights. The states' rights argument is so important. And I'm convinced that there is the belief in the world that these folks live in, that the United States and the U.S. Constitution and the U.S. populace represents the major obstacle to implementing their objectives. We are the last bastion of freedom. That's not hype.
That's not a slogan.
Yeah.
It is the final and biggest speed bump.
I just came from Toronto. I was there over the weekend to watch the screening of this new movie called Uninformed Consent. Recommend it for you. And it's available free. You can find it on the web. And I got to say, so we drop into Toronto Airport. That's a long story. Walk, it seems like a mile with no bathrooms. And speaking of bathrooms, you would have not had a good time. No. And we finally get into the lobby, and this sense of knowing what Trudeau has done, Canadian people, knowing the nuance of the truckers, having lived that vicariously, because I have so many friends up there that I've been communicating with, physicians and otherwise. I half expected to see black and red banners with Klaus Schwab's face arrayed around the central lobby. Yeah. There's just this oppressiveness with what's gone on, and then I go and speak to these folks, and we have a little get together. Talk about gallows humor, in Little Italy in Toronto, and they're all they've all been traumatized. We've all been traumatized, and no one knows, where can you go now? Where can you go in the world? For them, it's kind of bizarre. They all want to go to Florida. I don't know if you saw the clip from Bill Maher that was just out. He said, if they're going to force me to take another jab, I'm going to move to Florida. Everybody sees DeSantis and Joe Latipo as the beacon of liberty now, all over the world.
When there's like a famous like atheist quote, and it's And it's not. I'm personally have my own relationship with God, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. Is but there is kind of a it is a catchy atheist quote, and it's like there are 3,000 gods throughout like modern history. When you understand why you don't believe in 2,999 of them, you'll understand that I just don't believe in one more. To me, that applies to, and people say like, "Oh, we're just going to go to Florida." Well, you now understand the fervent obsession some people have, pointing at myself and others, at making sure the United States doesn't fall, because what you are doing is fleeing to another bastion.
Yeah.
Those bastions run out.
Yep.
There's a limited number of lifeboats. We're going to get off the Titanic. There's a lifeboat over there. There's X number of lifeboats, guys. No, we just got to get on that one. Well, then you'll understand why I'm so desperately talking about why we need to repair these lifeboats. Ah, you're just a patriot. What? Like, huh? It logically doesn't. It doesn't. The puzzle pieces don't connect.
Yeah. Um, and that gets to so many other things about the psychological state of the population,
Yeah.
that has been intentionally created. Whatever you want to say about it, whether we want to call it a psychosis or hypnosis or what. Um, the bottom line is it's self-evident
Mm-hmm.
that a large fraction of the population seems to walk around in a stupor, and it's incredibly frustrating for those of us that are awake.
Mm-hmm.
To just say, I mean, we just want to jump up and down and scream and say, please wake up.
Yeah. Which kind of brings me to like, I always have to zoom out more and more and try to like look at what it is that's going on. Um, and there's like two levels, and I guess I'll go to like the first one, the lower one, which is still pretty high. You're a bright guy. You understand science. I know that's a pretty broad statement, but is it? And I don't like it. But if we were just look at it objectively, what we're witnessing right now with the hyper wealthy, with their transnational nation or their transnational identity. They're not rooted in the country. Is this a natural end point? Is this just the modern version of like speciation where you're breaking away from, you know, there's all the different types of monkeys, and one of them eventually stands up with opposable thumbs. You break away. Are we is this just a, and it's bad because that doesn't bode well for me or you or anybody listening to this, but is this a natural endpoint of the hyper wealthy take all of the wealth? They'll have the best medical care. They'll transcend with first implants and then custom grown organs and then genetic manipulation and eventually, nano enhancement. And then I guess the ultimate cyber dream is to become one with the computer. Are we watching just like the top kind of, is the cell undergoing meiosis or mitosis or whatever?
So that's fascinating you bring that up. Um, that is the belief system of the WEF, what you just enumerated. And that is the belief system that underpins the logic of transhumanism. And to some extent, it underpins the logic of the transgender initiatives. That and Mr. Harari, who is kind of the chief scientific officer for the WEF, is notorious for advancing just precisely what you were mentioning as a very serious thesis. So I think the first main book is titled Sapiens, or that's one of the keywords in it. And I'm told that's now commonly taught in many universities. And then the second one, the key word is Homo Deus, which is to say God man. And this is the thesis behind his statements that so many find outrageous, that God is dead and man is God. That they or he have now positioned themselves as the new gods. the hubris is profound, um, and the threat is real. I mean, this is somewhere in the narcissist, psychopath, sociopath axis. And there really does seem to be a belief system that there is a need for depopulation.
Mm-hmm.
And there does seem to be a belief system that there will be a period of transition where there is surplus labor. There's another frame or lens through which this has been interpreted. Those that are of the Marxist bent see this, more as serious intellectual Marxists, not, wave the red flag and
break a window.
Yeah. This, what we're approaching is the inevitable crisis of capitalism that Karl Marx predicted, where the internal contradictions of capitalism, where the means of production gradually remove on an incremental basis the cost of labor as much as possible. And you get to a point where you have done so to such an extent that you really cannot continue to support the salaries of the labor class. I read a fascinating essay this morning, hasn't been published, that was touting this all as kind of a good thing in a transition period that we're in, being the challenge, but that it was envisioning a techno utopia in which we would have machines building machines. This is the Terminator series or the Matrix are the opposite versions, or the dystopia versions of that. But that we're coming to an age in which there would be enormous abundance of basically consumer goods as a consequence of digitization and technocracy and robotics and mechanization. And our challenge is going to be, what do we do with all these luxury goods and all this free time? And it totally, the essay completely disregarded the little fly in the ointment called population. But that there is a strange, almost euphoria in the thinking behind that some of these people are showing. This belief system of that we are on the threshold of some period of unlimited abundance, and we just have to get through the problem of all of the unnecessary eaters, and of course we'll do that with universal basic income, with no comprehension of what any of these subsidy type programs do to the human soul and to families and everything else. It is hard to encounter this utilitarian utopia thinking and process its meaning. That a friend of mine sent me a book that I'm starting to work through called Conflict of Visions by Thomas Sowell, Ideologic Origins of Political Struggles. And he makes the case that there are kind of two ways of looking at man, constrained and unconstrained. And that our Constitution in Adam Smith and that whole lineage our Constitution is a great expression of the logic of a constrained view of man, that man is inherently flawed. And what we have to do is things like build checks and balances to control his flaws and channel them in productive ways. This is the basis of capitalism. And the unconstrained view is basically Rousseauian, in that the natural state of man is to have a pure heart and to just coexist in nature in a wonderful, happy place. And that if we could only free man from all of the constraints and problems imposed on him. I'm in a non-gender specific fashion. Over time, as man has matured, then the true nature of man would be freed, and we would all live in a happy place. And I think that is part of what we're dealing with, is that those two fundamental visions are at odds with each other. And when we look at a lot of the kind of socialist Marxist logic that's being promoted right now, that's coming from this world where the beliefs, the system that seems to dominate is that we can get to utopia if we only do fill in the blank, this, that, and the other thing, right?
Isn't that always the isn't that
Always.
always like the
Yeah.
last
Yeah. And
famous last words before you
yeah.
fall into dystopia?
Yeah. And you and I are of the cast that's busy going, hey guys, there's this history thing.
There are people still alive from it's not even like 2,000 years ago. There are people alive with faded tattoos on their wrists from the last guy that said, if we just clean it all up real quick, it's going to be dirty. But if we just clean it all up real quick, we're good. We're Gucci. And it's like, and you have to wonder, are they pure evil or are they true believers, which is almost scarier.
I think so, that you're just hitting on another one of the sensitive topics that keeps coming up more and more. And it's the issue of whether there actually is evil and what does evil constitute. And these are big questions we're talking about here. And that seems to blend straight into, is there a God? Is there a divinity? Is there something which is beyond all of us? Whatever, however you want to construct it. And is there a fundamental interplay between good and evil? And the phrase, I forget the quote from, evil runs through the hearts of each of us, that this struggle between good and evil is something that is a very personal one that each of us have to battle. And it has always been the nature of man, the lot of man, to have to fight that battle on an individual basis. And I do think that we have had, as I look out on the things even that are happening in the present, the divisiveness, just as a kind of a trivial example of what's happening in this resistance movement, whatever that means globally, about the vaccines or medical freedom or whatever. There is a whole lot of division going on right now. Organizations are collapsing left and right. And there's various nefarious actors moving in that space, but it seems to be very much driven, a lot of what I'm seeing, by narcissism and egoism. And that axis, psychological axis, is the one that contains the sociopathy and psychopathy behaviors. The difference between one is developed and one is born. Psychopathy is more, I don't want to say it's on the autism spectrum, but it's a deficit of inborn deficit of empathy.
Yeah.
Whereas sociopathy is more of a learned behavior. As I understand it, I'm not a psychiatric professional. I just play one on TV. Yeah. So I think that's what I see around us, in the West in particular, not so much in Africa, in some of the emerging economies, is a rampant narcissism. And I think that and I talk about this in the book, I really think that the cancel culture, censorship, all that, it can be traced back, at least one significant thread traces back to sheltered children that are believed, are protected and come to believe that they have the right to be protected from any existential threat, any stressor, anything that would cause them to have cognitive dissonance. They have the right to be protected from any of that and from any other potential stressors in their life. They're entitled to that.
As the comedian Tim Dillon said, well, I'm kind of looking at this as like it almost goes perfectly in hand with a bunch of ungrateful people who think that everything should be handed with them. As the comedian Tim Dillon said, saying that you see the world through the lens of liberal or conservative really is just the shirking of independent thought. Because you go,
Nicely put.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's the funniest guy in the world. But he said that years ago, and I always think about it. Because if you look at something, you go, I vote Republican, but this guy is pro limiting the Second Amendment. But the Republican said it, and everyone on no, that's not independent thought. Or conversely, well, I am liberal, but they did say take the vaccine or you're fired. No, that's not bodily autonomy. But there is a shirking of independent thought. What's independent thought? You got to get those neurons sweating. What's that?
Yeah.
That's work.
Yeah.
You got to work. It's the same people that don't want to work. So why would they want to work mentally? So throw up a shield. Tell me what's right. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me what's
Well put.
misinformation.
Well
It's not
put.
mine. It's Tim Dillon's. Credit to him.
Well, can I riff off of that just a little
Sure,
bit?
go for it.
It's been a topic in a couple of my Substacks, and you know that over time I've consistently said, "Don't let me tell you what to think. I'm trying to help you to think. You have to think. Yeah, you have to think for yourself, and that is our only way. That is our weapon against tyranny. If we have a shield and a sword against tyranny, it's independent thought."
Yeah.
And what I've taken to doing recently is citing a website that is Your Logical Fallacy Is. Okay, so if you Google that, or don't use Google, please, DuckDuckGo or whatever your favorite is. Your Logical Fallacy Is. What you'll find is a great little graphic presentation with links for all the common logical fallacies. And what I encourage my readers to do is take some time and learn the logical fallacies. And once you do, you can see right through the bullshit that has been pushed at you all the time in the media.
Yeah.
Because they use, like, the straw man is one of their favorites. Appeal to authority is another favorite. There's No True Scotsman is another one. There's a bunch of these that they use time and time and time again. They're kind of lazy about it. And once you see them, you can just, it's like what is it that it's really a popular meme now, the glasses for they.
Yeah. Where you see the truth.
Yeah.
It's almost like pulling aside a kid and being like, listen, the girl that likes you is going to act like she doesn't like you. You're the older kids are going to say they took your nose. They actually can't take your nose. It's all an illusion. And you're probably never going to encounter quicksand in your life, so don't worry about it. If you were told that, middle school and high school would be so much less horrifying. Right? If you just look back and go, oh, all right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that is our journey. If you and I in these podcasts have a mission, it's to help our viewers think for themselves and to question, not just question authority, question everything. Yeah, and you're right.
Including us.
But that's the big ugly lesson that I learned from Matthias Desmet, is that only about 10% of people really want to be free. The rest want to be told what to do. Again,
Tim Dillon. The reality is the more you get to observe society, he goes, the more you realize that people like the boot. They act like they don't.
They do.
They like to dress up as, I'm a freedom fighter. They like the boot. They like the blacked out van. They like it.
I like to say, staying in the metaphor of childhood dysfunctional behaviors, they all want a harsh father.
Well, that's what else he says, but I was using a little cleaner language for the podcast. He goes, they all want a daddy figure. He's like, they all want, he's a gay comedian. He goes, they all want daddy. They want daddy to come home from work and put him in place. I don't think he's entirely wrong.
No, we were taught this in med school at Northwestern, that there's kind of two categories of patients. And it's my big flaw as a clinician, is that There are those who just want to be told what to do. And there are those that want you to talk about through all the options and discuss the diagnosis with them. And the punchline is almost all of them just want to be told what to do.
Yeah. The other one just wants you to let them down a little nicer.
Yeah.
Well, you can do A, B, C, but I recommend D.
Yeah.
Okay, I chose D. Sure you
Yeah.
did, buddy. Sure you did. And I know I only got you for a couple more minutes. I'll try to wrap it all in. About one thing which you said about UBI. It's gonna be utopia. We're never gonna have to work. Don't forget they also said that you're gonna take some really warm showers and then we're gonna give you new clean clothes. And that's what they said to the Jews right after the train. So don't fall for the gold at the end of the rainbow because
The
it's not
shiny
there.
object. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the last trick they give, right? They
Yeah.
um
And along those lines, the shiny object of not only universal basic income, but centralized digital cyber currency.
oh yeah,
Yeah, there's a bunch of these little shiny objects that they're showing us,
run
and
away.
you've got to look and say, does that make sense? And if you do that, I suspect you end up buying gold and silver.
Yeah, that's the end. That's the end. I can give you if you're wondering what is the end goal of all these red pills. It's screaming at a microphone in your apartment trying to hoard gold and water. I can tell you what the end goal is. It's going, huh? What do I do now? But so I guess to if we're gonna, define the transhumanism, that speciation, that the separation of the cells, but completely uh lopsided in terms of resources. To me, there's then that leaves us with two things. And the first is the bridge left, not left, right, conservative, liberal. I just mean what option one. Option one is you start to understand the pilgrims leaving Europe, what, 500 years ago. And what do I mean by that? And I'm a little more shaky on my history then, so excuse me if I say something incorrect. But at the time, that is the pinnacle of human civilization, right? Just for the
Yep.
time in terms of
Or you're getting booted off the continent to go be a prisoner in Australia,
that too. There's
because
another one. That's
yeah,
also an option. But so it's 500 years ago. But at the time, don't look at it from 500 years ago. Look at it from where they are then. They've got cobblestone streets. They've got stained glass windows. They've got Gutenberg's printing press. I mean, they're at the bee's knees. Da
yep.
Vinci's the modern day Musk. He's like, I believe there's going to be a flying machine one day, and like you're like, man, we are really living at the pinnacle of the world. I mean, they don't think the Earth's flat anymore. I mean, they think that we might not even be the center of the like. It is. You're at the precipice of a new world. People still got on boats for a 3-month journey across the ocean
That they
with
had a good chance of dying in.
yeah, best case is you die and the ship doesn't go down. Worst case is you drown or drink salt water or eaten by a shark. And if you play the cards right and the gods really smile upon you, you get to a new land where you might be raped and eaten by some indige, or you might conquer them and then die from a disease. Best case scenario, you'll get here. And once you're all settled down, about another 200 years will pass. And then, if you're lucky, you'll get in a wagon again and go 4 months across to go find some gold. Who in their right mind would do that? Well, they were escaping persecution, and that sounds great in the textbook that you learn in middle school before Thanksgiving break. And then you make like the cardboard turkey that looks like your hand or whatever the hell. But then you start to think about, well, where are we now? In 500 years, when they look back at us and they're like, the internet was only 30 years old. Everybody had smartphones, social media, you can all access each other. There's an abundance of information. The Library of Alexandria is available in your pocket. You have Uber delivered to your. I can have Taco Bell delivered to my door while I'm playing 4K video games with my friends across the nation. Why
What's
did
not to what's not to like?
Why did people get on a rocket ship to travel 9 months, a trip they might not survive, to land in a place? Who knows what diseases are there or what alien diseases or just personal skirmishes? What equivalent of Jamestown is going to happen in Mars? Well, if you can now look back where we are and look at how great society is, but you do reach a certain truth, which is this is all great. Taco Bell at 4 a.m. is great. But ultimately, there is something much deeper and more satisfying, and it's being free and knowing that you are setting it up for your children and children's children and onwards for centuries live a free life. then things like going on a rocket to Mars start to make sense. Why would you leave it all? Why would you leave the United States as an educated white male in 2022? Well, you start to see a deeper truth. Taco Bell's great for a while, but you can't go to bed at night, or you can't look in the mirror and be okay with yourself when you just see what is going on, when there are the metaphorical red and black flags of Klaus's face. Then you start to go, screw it. Let's go to a new world. And to me, that's like one path, is we're still in this four-dimensional reality. And so that's one, becoming pilgrims to a new planet. The other is, and this is like the deeply spiritual kind of like acid trip, far out idea. But it really is that we're here to learn something, right? And when you get a test, when you get a question on a test, the last question is a bonus and it's a real head scratcher and like organic chemistry. And you're like, all right, I know how to do a problem. And then you're like, but wait, they're not even giving us the proper tools. They want me to turn a ketone into a carboxylic acid using platinum. And you're like, wait, what in the fuck? Like, what am I? No part of you ever goes, hey, doc, this question's stupid. I can't answer it. No, there's a reason why it's worth 10 extra points on your grade. It's because it's insanely hard. And you got to squeeze every bit of your mind to go, how do I get this right? You don't take the MCAT and go, well, there's no right answer. No, they're trying to weed out the morons. So you really got to get those neurons sweating. It's not supposed to look like it's possible. That's why it's a hard question worth 10 extra points on such a huge test. I can't help but feel that there is something it's supposed to be lopsided. When you're a pledge in a fraternity at an SEC school, up until the last day of pledgeship, you were told that you're the worst pledge class in 150 years. You guys aren't going to be initiated. You're going to have to be held over for Christmas break. You're all going to get cut. And then eventually you get initiated. You're never supposed to feel like you make it. The entire purpose, having been both a pledge and a brother, is to make them feel like there is no winning. The tidal wave is coming and you're going to die. How do you act in that moment? And some guys, when they realize there's no winning, they quit. And some guys go, you know what? I think we're all going to get cut, but screw them. Like, y'all are my what? Y'all are my brothers. I'm not going to let you down. Boom. You're in. You understand it. You've been initiated. You now understand that no matter what, you're there for each other. I can't help but think there's not supposed to be an option. You die and go, well, how are we going to win? They had $10 trillion. They had all the gold, all the weapons, all the satellites. They had all the vaccines. They're dropping bioweapons on us, and you're not supposed to. And I just feel like God looks at you and goes, no shit. That's why it's the final question on the test. What do you do when there is no other option? Do you cave and do you betray yourself? Or do you stand up for what's right, even when your stomach's turning and you could vomit and your knees are jelly? I think that's the other thing is so it's either this is what's pushing us to this is the growth factor as a society to push us to a new planet, or there is some higher level. We're being put through the gauntlet. This is your PhD thesis. Are you getting the check mark or not? What do you do? Because it's very easy. It's very easy to try to win when it looks like you can win. It's not that easy when you're like, okay, so it seems like the CIA and every intelligence agency and every banking industry and defense contractors all in on some weird transhumanism elite. Should I go along with it or should I try to do the right thing? I'm going to try to do the right thing. Are you nuts? Yeah, that's a little bit, but you have to. And then the natural criticism would be, what if you're wrong? What if this isn't a test? Oh no, then you did the right thing and you're proud of yourself anyway. Where's the drawback on that? There was no test. There was no God. So you're telling me I stood my ground and did the right thing for nothing? Oh shit. What a disaster. I don't really know if there was a question in there or if that's just me with my own existential crises, but that's what I think. Either
I
new planet
actually
or
I
simulation.
I appreciate what you said.
Thank you.
I think there's a third rail too.
All right.
And that's the possibility that the task at hand is to refine yourself, your own soul.
Oh.
That's the so that's another challenge.
Okay.
Is and it's a personal one, that personal journey of being, of self. This is a kind of a Buddhist way of thinking about it, of the personal journey of becoming an enlightened being,
Mm.
and being at peace and seeking peace. So that's just another thing to think about. But I appreciate what you were saying also.
No, I like yours. I do think that is a, in doing this podcast, I've lost more weight. I've stopped drinking. I've read more books. I've meditated more. I've grown closer to my family. I've done more charitable acts because there is a point where it's almost like I'm going to control my own fiefdom of my own life. And
Yeah,
I think it is a Buddha quote, Siddhartha Gautama, right? It's only by exposing ourselves again and again to annihilation can we find that which cannot be destroyed. And it's
nice.
just the centermost nugget. It's the diamond at the very center that you can't melt. Everything else is ablated. And then there's just that purity at the center.
Well, I
Well,
think that is probably a pretty good place to
I was about to say, man,
give a wrap.
put a little cherry on that. That's question everything except don't question me when I say get Dr. Malone's book when it comes out. What day next month? Do you know?
No, it's not. It's going to be in November. It's towards the end of November. I don't know the specific date. I hope it hits that. It's in Tony Lyon's hands now. We've
It is it is out of our hands now. It is
just so.
all right. Well, I would love to have you back on for that book. Thank you so much for coming on here again and listening to my incoherent ramblings, which, well, we started with COVID. We kind of stayed on COVID. And then, I mean, what, in 10 minutes, we're on JFK and then Jekyll Island and then eventually Buddhism. So
Yeah, we went to the big picture this time. That's good.
it is.
So
We
let's
zoomed all the way out. Beautiful.
okay.
Well, I think that was
Yeah.
awesome, man. Not man, Dr. Malone. I love talking to you. Thank you for coming on. As always, I thoroughly enjoy these. You've got a beautifully inquisitive mind, and I look forward to many more. And man, Matt, I'm debating should I call this episode Transhumanism Psychosis? Just to
Do it.
just okay, just to stir the pot. All right. Dr.
Good.
Malone, thank you so much. Safe travels. I will message you this episode when it's up, and I look forward to getting your book and having you on for that sometime next month, December, whenever it is.
Thanks, Tommy. It's
Thank you
always my
so
pleasure.
much. God bless. God bless.